Advisory Board meeting on Monday, June 6th. We do have enough people for quorum, so would you please call the roll, Brandon?
Sure can. Eric DeGroot is excused, so we'll move on to Pat Dwyer-Helquest,
Here.
Lisa Marone,
Here.
Vic Oliver,
Here.
and Osmond, Bob Peschel, Brad Spambauer,
Here.
Aaron Wojciechowski, Michelle Bogdan Metzel, and Margie Davy.
Here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And I expect we'll have some other people coming through the door yet, too. Okay, well, I'm guessing there's no public comment this evening, so let's move on to the approval of minutes from the May 2nd meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I move we accept them.
Or a second?
Second.
Okay, we can do it in person. Yeah. Okay, everybody who agrees that we should take them as written, say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next thing on our agenda tonight is Jackson Street, Oregon Street Bridge recommendation. And we have the privilege of having Mark Lyons with us tonight, who will be explaining this to us.
Yeah, you got the B team. You don't have the engineering folks here today, but I'm going to go over a little bit of the PowerPoint that's been making the rounds through the community. A number of boards and commissions have already heard this. Council had a workshop. There's been a number of public meetings as well with the public to go over some of the alternatives for the Oregon-Jackson Street Bridge reconstruction. Ultimately, the goal here is to get as many boards to weigh in on the topic as possible before this goes back to council on June 14th, where they will make their official recommendation down to the DOT. So a little bit of background on it, just for a little bit of context where the bridge is located. The bridge was originally constructed in 1956. In 2017, they began the environmental study was going to be replaced. The state at that time determined to hold off for 5 years. So now we're back at it again today. Right now, construction is tentatively scheduled for 2028. Some of the other prior meetings, you can see there was a lot of work done in 2016. Then starting in 2021, this picked back up late last year. And the local officials meeting was actually in March of this year. There was also a public informational meeting in April of this year. So, kind of what can be done. Obviously, the first alternative is to do nothing. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but when the DOT puts these scenarios together, they always start with the do nothing scenario. This bridge does need to be replaced, so that's not an option, but they do always start with that. Second would be alternative B, which is just a rehab of basically the mechanical components of the bridge. This would extend out the life of the bridge approximately about another 20 years before full replacement would need to take place. So they do have an alternative, which is alternative B for just kind of mechanical component fixes of the existing bridge. Then we get into alternative C, which is a fixed span bridge, so it would no longer be a lift bridge. They do have two alternatives shown here, which is C1 and C2. Main difference is how the configuration of this area works. So this will be the difference between the two fixed span alternatives I'm about to show you. Both do include realigning of Division Street with Marion Road. So right now, if you think about it, the Chamber building sits here, and Division Street actually comes down and connects here. Both these alternatives kind of clean up that intersection, making it a traditional four-way stop instead of that offset intersection we have today. It does take the bridge landing point back to just before you would get to 6th Avenue. And the landing point on the north side was essentially be in that new Marion Road interchange. So obviously the landing points where it touches back down into existing grade do get pushed out a little bit. It is about 11 feet higher in the middle than the current bridge. So in C1, it's a bit of looking at adding a cul-de-sac and redoing the access points into the city center area. C2 again is the same fixed span bridge, but looking at different alternatives of how access could be made to these parking lots for city center and the parking bridge. Again, being the fixed span. Here's just an example image of what that alternative C fixed span would look like if constructed. I will show you relatively small columns for support when it comes to the fixed span bridge. As you'll see in a little while when we get into the lift bridge options, substantially more under vision issues for what it takes to do the fixed span, but the high-level fixed bridge just has the small supports. Alternative C is then a new on-alignment lift bridge. So it maintains similar touchdown points to what are there today. This one does not have under clearance for the Riverwalk to go under the bridge. This is one of the only alternatives that the Riverwalk still has to go up, cross the bridge, and go back down. All the other alternatives actually maintain the Riverwalk now going underneath the bridge for continuous Riverwalk. Alternative F is raised alignment with enough clearance. So this raises the bridge a little bit. So this is a lift bridge like we have today, but it gets the clearance up a little more to maintain the Riverwalk underneath it, pushes things back just ever so slightly off what's there today. But this does allow access under the bridge for the Riverwalk. So this is what a new lift bridge would look like. This is where I point out, you can see there are much larger structures needed to house those lift bridge components, similar to what we have today. Like I said, it is about 11-foot difference when you talk about this overall height. Alternative J1. So some of the discussions that came out when they were doing their public outreaches, the DOT did hear what are the options of trying to shorten the time the bridge is closed. So right now it's about a 2-year construction for full replacement, which means that bridge will be completely closed for about 2 years. So they looked at doing an offset version, where essentially year 1 the bridge would stay open as they built the new bridge, and then year 2 would be construction of the elements to combine them, so you don't have a 1-year closure of the street. This is something that was important, for example, when they did the Winneconne Bridge. It was the only bridge within that area, so by going with a full reconstruction closing for 2 years is a much bigger impact. Obviously here in Oshkosh you go a little bit in either direction, you have another bridge. But they did want to show that an offset option was available. So this is an offset option for a fixed bridge, or a high span bridge. Similarly to the last one, it's an offset fixed bridge. Again, it's talking more about how you do this cul-de-sac. M1 is a partial offset. So here to do, this I believe is still lift bridge. Clearance, raise clearance. To do the fixed bridge offset, they couldn't fully offset it because of having to tie back into grades for their roadway, so they could only partially offset it. It really makes this kind of a moot point because you'd end up with still 2s or constructions. You don't really gain anything in this instance by doing the offset. M1, same thing. Again, it's really looking at how this interchange is done from M2. So this is looking at a cul-de-sac option. This is looking at more driveway options, but really maintaining that intersection at Marion and Pearl and Division. So a couple of things I want to point out about all those, we can go back and talk about more specifically if you want to, is to look at the relative cost. The main thing to understand here is when it comes to the cost of the bridge, the DOT will pay for the lowest cost replacement option. So in that case, that is a fixed bridge for the high-level fixed span. Anything beyond that cost, the city has to pay for. So if the city does elect to go with, example, a new lift bridge, we're talking in today's dollars about a $25 million difference that the city has to pay for. Ownership, regardless of which option selected, moves from the DOT to the city, which means all maintenance cost and operation of the bridge shifts from the city to the county, from the state to the city, regardless of what option. So if it is a new high-level lift bridge, maintenance of those components shift to the city, workers for manning the bridge shift to the city. So all that cost does shift to the city regardless of what option. So that's, I said, it's roughly $25 million more shifted onto the city for a lift bridge, plus all that additional long-term maintenance cost shifts to the city. I think it's probably the most important part from this slide. So funding considerations, basically what I just ended up saying. State will fund rehabilitation of the lowest cost replacement. Replacement will trigger a jurisdictional transfer from the state to the city, and the city will assume all operational maintenance cost of the new structure. Just a little bit about timing and what's coming next. Environmental study is taking place right now. This is where they are looking for some feedback from council, so then they can move it starting in 23 into the engineering phase, potential property acquisition starting in 25 to 27, and then really this is the big one. They're looking at construction starting in 2028 for that 2-year build out of the new bridge. Kind of things that are happening after you folks make a decision today. This is going to Plan Commission tomorrow for their official recommendation, ultimately on to Common Council for their final recommendation to the DOT next Tuesday. I went through a lot there very quickly. I'm happy to go back so you can see anything you want to. What we're looking for today is a recommendation out of this body on what their preference is. You don't have to pick a specific, I want M1. Several of the boards that have already weighed in have said, for example, they like option C. They don't care which one of the option C's. They basically have said, we have enough time to figure out, for example, if this will let me go back. Is it going to load? They don't necessarily care what this configuration ends up looking like for C1 and C2. But they have said, okay, we like version C. You guys figure out the details later. So what we're looking for today is fixed bridge, lift bridge, on alignment, off alignment. What is the preference of this body? I know Margaret has a lot of history with last time this went through. Margaret, you want to add to the...
Yeah, I can give you a little bit we had taken a look at this in February of 2017. I think, were you on then, Vic? I can't remember. And I can't remember if you were either, Pat, but we did take a look at this. The alternatives were a little bit different back then, but very similar. Alternative C1 was the preferred one that we chose last time. The reasons for that are because the cost of construction initially, the cost of maintenance, because that will be transferred to the city no matter what, being able to maintain the Riverwalk without having to go up and over, the longevity of the bridge itself, because it lasts longer to have a fixed span bridge than it does to have a lift bridge, and the fact that a fixed span bridge is a safety plus for anybody who lives on the other side of the river from the hospital, say. It would always provide a path across the river for anyone in the city. So those were the things we looked at last time. I did go back and look in the minutes to see just how much they had explained, the person who wrote the minutes at that time had explained our discussion, and basically all the minutes say is preferred C1. But those were our reasons behind it, and we did have a very long discussion on that. So questions for Mark or for me? Brad.
Yeah, I guess at first glance, it seems like the C alternatives seem like the most sustainable from just not putting in mechanization of a lift bridge that requires maintenance, and when parts fix, the bridge is stuck, open, or closed.
Prime example right now, right?
I look at the schematic here. It would be nice to see what those, right? So you get on the Jackson side of the bridge and look at where the the roundabout or the cul-de-sac, I guess, excuse me. That reworking of aligning Division with Marion. Perhaps there's, it's kind of a very simple difference there, between this one and the one with the little cul-de-sac area. Maybe that's more of a preference of the folks, right, who are in and around city center, and those details can be worked out later. I would just be curious to know traffic pattern, and it looks like removed parking. As a very car-centric society, I know people get heated about parking spaces going away.
Yeah, so like this alternative, they add parking kind of here
Okay.
instead to
So it
kind
just
of
is-
compensate for it.
It's shifted, not necessarily removed.
The big difference between
Located.
C1 and C3 is the elimination of direct access on to Jackson Street,
That-
which was something some of the boards have had preference that it be removed. This is kind of a weird driveway right now.
That looks problematic to me as someone who, and I don't know, is that going up that ramp?
That is the one that goes directly up the ramp, correct?
Yeah.
You've got the driveway into the parking lot, which is more here.
Right,
Then you've
right.
got the ramp. So this would be aligning it where the other driveways are moved and it's directly onto the ramp.
And I don't know how much that gets used. Maybe that matters more to some people versus others, but getting traffic flowing into a bridge where people are kind of just trying to go in one direction or another, right? You're now adding another direction of traffic to that. So C1 seems a little bit more, I mean, for all the other reasons, right? Like then tack on you're not trying to build a driveway into,
Traffic.
yeah,
Major traffic.
major just kind of people trying to move in one direction or another.
That was Bike and Pedestrian Committee recommended C with the elimination of any driveways on Jackson that were possible. For some of that same reason.
Right.
Traffic conflicts that may arise.
Right.
And one thing we didn't mention, but I think it happens with all the bridges except the rehab does it, where the bike lanes and sidewalks would be wider and added
Correct.
onto.
Everything outside of just rehabbing the one we have today widens the overall bridge footprint to have bike lanes and sidewalks for additional sizing for access across the bridge.
Means that cutting across that also adds to a lack of safety for the bikes and peds going
Right.
through there.
Right. I like that it maintains the Riverwalk underneath. I think aligning those two roads just makes sense. I mean, this seems like a very sensible long-term vision.
I will say both of our public safety divisions, police and fire, have weighed in on preference of the C alternative. Again, not necessarily which one, but having a permanent bridge they can cross, to get back and forth across the river was important to them.
And what was the height difference again?
About 11 feet. So,
Is there impact to our waterways and sports and boating and
so
situations?
the fixed bridge would be the same water clearance as the 41 causeway. So if you can
Oh,
get
sure.
under 41, you would get under this bridge.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
This bridge presently opens about 400 times a year more than the Wisconsin Street Bridge, or the Ohio Street Bridge, excuse me, because of the difference in clearance. This current bridge that we have today is a little bit lower, so it has to open, like I said, about 400 more times than Ohio Street.
Got it.
Wow.
The fixed bridge alternative, if
I wonder
elected, like I said, is the same height as the 41 causeway.
Sure.
That is fascinating that we have bridges that have different clearances and would require them to open more or less.
One of the elements with the rehab that is giving concern to our public works staff is if that was done, it would actually line up all three of our bridges for replacement in a roughly the same time period by adding the 20 years to the existing lifespan. All three of our bridges in the downtown area here would be about at their maximum life within a few years of each other. So they felt that was probably not a great idea.
To just do the basic rehab.
Just do the basic rehab of this.
Yeah. I don't know if
That
I don't
makes-
know if there would be someone who would be in favor of that.
It makes it only good for like 25 years then, right?
Yeah, adds
Which
about
is
20,
just
25
silly.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
The
seems
new bridge,
short-sighted.
and don't quote me on this, I could be wrong. I thought Mr. Robbie said it was built for like 75 years, a new fixed bridge.
That's what we were told last time.
Wow. Well, that'll take you to the end of the century.
Other thoughts or questions from anyone?
So I guess what like no matter what option is picked, well I guess besides the rehab one, what happens to the bridge until 2028?
So at this time, they are actively working on getting a repair solution for the bridge today.
Okay,
It would be rehabbed or upgraded to be functionable,
sure.
and then it would just be maintenance from now until whatever the decision in 2028 is.
Okay.
You don't like it today, Vic?
No, not really. Kind of a pain in the butt.
Okay, well then, would anybody like to make a recommendation on which of these we would like to approve?
I would recommend that we stay with our initial plan on alternative C1.
Okay. Motion on the table, any second?
I can second that.
Okay, any discussion? All right then, can we do a voice vote on this?
This would do a
Roll call?
roll call vote.
Okay.
All right, so roll call here for the bridge recommendation of C1. We'll start with Pat. Lisa?
Aye.
Vic?
Aye.
Brad?
Aye.
And Margie.
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Recommendation.
All right, awesome. Thank you, guys. So, the next thing on our agenda,
I think it's this, right?
yes it is the election of officers. And we will give that to Brandon to handle.
All right, I'm going to follow a script here, so bear with me. So we need to elect the chairperson for the commission. I will call nominations 3 times. We will then have a motion to close nominations and vote. At this time, I call for nominations for chair.
I nominate Margie.
So weird, sorry.
So then I guess I ask for a second. Any other nominations for chair?
Third and final.
Third and final time, any other nominations for chair? Okay, it says if there's only one candidate for chair, you may ask for a motion to close nominations and elect the only candidate nominated. So motion to close nominations and elect Margie Davy as chair by calling the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 0.
Are
Okay,
you allowed to accept it or turn it down?
We wouldn't let her.
so now we have to do a roll call though. So
I
nominations.
could turn it down, but I didn't.
Only one, you don't have to do a roll call.
Oh, we don't, okay. Secretary, we'll call the roll call, blah, blah, blah. So I don't have to do a roll call for that? All right. So,
Then we go to vice chair.
Vice chair.
yep. So declaration of Margie Davy as chair. Okay. At this time, I call for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Michelle. I'll teach her not to show up.
Has anybody asked her or not?
She'll be fine.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Third and final time, any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, motion to close nominations and elect Michelle Bogdan-Metzel as vice chair by calling the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nominations are closed. Declaration of Michelle Bogdan-Metzel for vice chair.
There you go.
There you
Okay.
You can do secretary, but that's just yourself anyway, so you don't.
go. Got it.
I don't know that I even knew we had a vice chair.
Yeah, that's for like when I don't show up.
Just, Margie always comes, you don't have to worry about it.
You'll never know.
Usually one meeting a year. Michelle leads, yeah.
All right.
I try to let her know.
Seems
way
to be
in
your
advance.
average, yeah, one a year.
What do we have next on the agenda?
We have snow and ice removal ordinance, discussion and action.
Do you guys want me to bring anything up on the computer? Do you want to look at this?
Right after I shut it off.
Did you just shut it off?
I did. I turned
Yeah, I mean, if you can bring up the kind of redlined item, the red line.
the software. Yeah, you're gonna turn it back on.
It's the last time we invite you.
Fine, I'm just gonna leave before I mess anything up. Have a good evening, everyone.
You too.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
So as you guys will recall, Brad had very kindly offered to look at this ordinance for us and make some revisions to it after our last discussion on it.
This might just take a second here. Let's see.
I thought he had it. Where'd he put it? Oh, there it is.
So as soon as this loads up, I'll pull it up. But I guess, Brad, if you want to, whoever wants to talk about it before, that's fine too.
Go ahead and kind of give us an overview of what we were doing here.
Sure, yeah. So, if I recall, basically what I did was I looked through the city code and made suggestions or edits to what's kind of current. So current section 25-68. And then I put in some, kind of just changes, edits, comments there, additions. And then I also added some items that I guess could be added to as a potential sort of suggested new back page for the mailer. So when you receive the mailer with your water bill, whenever it is, October or November, basically just kind of creating a new set of information that would be on the back of that. So there's a descriptive paragraph called the hidden costs of oversalting, as well as an image, and then kind of an infographic. And then I put the sources on the bottom. I think the point there is, I think folks, particularly residents, will be less likely to use salt if they see the financial connection to the degradation of sidewalk and their aprons and that sort of thing. And this is all information that is provided by Allison Madison, who presented to us from Saltwise. So this is all information widely, searchable on the Wisconsin Saltwise website. The kind of other edits that I made to the first page were also taking from similar language that was from, I believe, a municipality in Minnesota. So I basically just kind of looked at their language and then kind of tried to craft it and match it up with what we had, or added new, but that was, language kind of drawn from that municipality's salting policy. And then it looks like there were some edits made by city staff here.
Yeah, so I can go through those right
These are edits on your version.
Correct.
So all of the text, was basically what I kind of put in, and then I think anything really in like red, orange, where you're seeing that stuff. So blue, I think, is all new content. That I think the blue is the stuff that would have been. Well, I don't know.
I can kind of explain
Okay,
it. So
go ahead.
So a lot of it, a lot of the black that you see is going to be original language.
Yep.
I don't quite know why the colors change the way they do.
Yeah, kind of.
But so the sprinkle, I think, is something you had added.
Yep.
And I think maybe we removed the word sprinkle here. I would have to look at the original. But
Okay.
the one change you'll see is, so you had these kind of 4 bullet points here. And when I met with Department of Public Works, they recommended all this be part of that mailer and not part of actual code, because they viewed it as something that they wouldn't be able to enforce. It's not enforceable stuff.
It's informational to help people decide, but it's.
Yeah. So then, but they did this part, this last sentence, they were okay with it being part of the code and adding it to the end of that paragraph there.
Okay.
Yep.
That
So that went
that
there.
part, yeah. Okay. That.
But salt must be scattered with space approximately 3 inches between crystals. Like that, if we got phone calls about that, that would be really difficult for us to go
To
out.
verify.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's kind of the logic behind removing some of those from being actual code.
So I guess what I would say is perhaps those first 3 bullets need to be added almost to this back page.
That's what they were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And added more as just like tips.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay.
So then I think the other
Fair enough.
The other big one was, I think, this here. So again, they just said, these are their comments, we have no authority over anyone but the property owner, so we wouldn't be able to, if it's an occupant or a tenant or whatever, whenever, those types of situations, we don't have the ability to
Yeah.
enforce anything on them, it's only enforceable to the property owner.
Okay,
So that was
so,
kind of like if you look at, this doesn't let you click on it, but this is, if I go
But-
to the real document, it'll
but
show me
the,
what
but
part
the
it's for.
paragraph starts every owner, so could it just be removed
Or
or
occup-
occupant?
Every owner of any.
Well,
dwelling.
let's just keep reading here because there's other things too, right? So they said staff receives 400 to 500 shoveling and snow complaints a year as it is. This
Wow.
requirement would likely add to that number.
Hmm.
If we were, and again, because it's in the version that it's in, I don't have the ability to click this and show you what part that's for, but I think it might be this. City of Oshkosh may sweep such material or authorize some person to do the same on behalf of the city of Oshkosh. So the fact that they already received this many and they have to respond to them, they viewed that as a thing that would add a large workload for them to come
Be an
out and,
unmanageable number with present staff, probably.
yeah.
Okay,
And then this last one is basically just saying that they don't view, so 40, I don't know what this must be some code, 40 CFR 302.4 does not list sodium chloride as a hazardous substance. We should not be creating our own definitions. The city does not collect hazardous material.
That's probably
Oh.
federal law, isn't it, the CFR?
Not sure.
I have no idea.
Yeah, probably.
But salt will be collected by the city for proper disposal as a hazardous material. So I mean, again, maybe the intent of what you're trying to say there is, we can change the words a little bit maybe, but as it was written, this is what their response was for it.
Sure, okay.
Because the city does not collect hazardous material, nor do they define that as a hazardous material. So it's just kind of all encompassing, doesn't
Sure.
jive with what they're,
Sure, okay.
but I guess, for today, if you guys wanted to try to approve something, or if you want to take another stab at it maybe, or, we would be able to, remove the word keep, remove the word sprinkle, add the word sprinkle, add this sentence, and that would pretty much be it.
So
That's-
can I ask, just for a kind of a process standpoint, I want others to have an opportunity to make comments or provide some feedback. But would the next step be I could take this, go off of the comments given and rework it and then bring it back
Yeah.
for approval?
Yeah, and we have
Absolutely.
time. We're not going to have snow for a little while, I hope.
Right. God willing.
One
Okay.
of those games.
Well, if other folks have comment, I mean, I have things that I see right away that I, understand some of what has been commented on here, and I'm happy to make those edits.
And we could always too, I mean, like, you've already talked in different scenarios with SAB and this individual. So like, I'm sure he would be open to having a phone call with you if you wanted to try to hash some things out about the code.
Okay.
I mean, I'm speaking on their behalf, but I'm assuming based on previous scenarios, he'd be open to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is someone from Public Works?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I was just curious about the opening thing.
Oh.
You want to make a distinction between what you do when the temperatures are above 15 degrees Fahrenheit and what you do when they're below, right?
Yeah, that's what that final sentence does there.
Right,
Top.
except the sentence before that doesn't make that distinction. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think
Why-
the assumption is when the
Right.
temperature is above 15, you use salt.
Right, right.
when
I
it's
don't-
below-
Yeah, well, they talk about,
It doesn't mean that you couldn't use sand above 15.
well,
Sure.
it says shall sprinkle the sidewalk or curb ramp with material to accelerate melting, which would not be sand,
And preventing slipping.
Correct.
and preventing slipping. So, I mean, if I'm looking at that and says it almost sounds like you have to sprinkle with something that accelerates melting irregardless of the temperature. So I don't know if their phrase should be put in there at temperatures above 15 and above. You need to sprinkle with something that accelerates melting.
So are you looking for adding the phrase when temperatures are above 15 degrees Fahrenheit?
Yeah, so you have the two scenarios, what you have to do when it's above 15, what you have to do when it's 15 and below.
Okay.
you know, rather than having, this is what you always do, basically is what that opening sentence doesn't say, it's only for stuff above 15, it just says you have to do it.
It doesn't,
Right.
but it doesn't say they have to, it's just recommendation.
Well, shall sprinkle, that's not a
Not must.
recommendation, is it?
No.
Yeah, so the way that I would read that, the way it currently stands is it's all encompassing. So it's saying that if you have ice that is formed, you shall do these things. The second sentence is a recommendation saying that when it's 15 below, you're recommended to do something different.
Do you want to remove
So is
the
this a
assumption?
recommendation, or this is a requirement?
This part here is a requirement, right?
Right,
It's
and
saying
I'm
that
saying, is there, to me, it would be clearer if you
well,
specified that
someone
that
could
was
still
for
do
above
it
15.
under 15. We're just letting them know in the code that the city doesn't recommend that you do that.
You could also
Right,
use
I don't have a
different ice
problem
melter
with, I don't have a
above 15.
problem with the sentence saying when pavement
Same as
temperatures drop
ours.
below 15, that's clear. But I'm saying the sentence before that isn't clear that it's for only above 15.
It's not.
But it's not for only above.
Okay, only required when above 15. It's not a recommendation, it's a
No,
requirement.
it's required when there's ice.
It's a requirement, but what if it's ice at 10 degrees? Do you still have to do it?
You would-
Then it's recommended that
Okay,
salt will not
to
be
me, it would be
effective in
clear
sand.
if you had one sentence for 15 and above and one sentence for 15 and
It doesn't though, because
We don't want to limit people,
You-
though.
right.
It's,
Well, no,
it's
no, no,
a
it's not saying
choice
you
to.
shall not. It's saying you're only required to do it when it's 15 and above.
no.
No, you're
No.
required to remove the ice no matter how cold it gets.
Right, but it's saying,
Then when
saying
pavement
you
drops
have to,
below 15.
shall sprinkle.
I mean,
with a
technically, you don't
material to
have to above
accelerate
33,
melting.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, it
Right.
says, it's saying you shall sprinkle, okay, it's saying if ice is formed, so it cannot be removed, the person owning such premises shall sprinkle. So that means if there's ice, no matter what the temperature.
Correct.
You have to sprinkle with a thing that accelerates melting, right?
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So to me, that's saying no matter what the temperature is, if there's ice, you have to sprinkle it with
Correct.
an ionic
Salt or a
compound.
different ice melter.
Right, which would be some, yeah. So is that what you mean? Or you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so then below 15, you still are required to do it if there's ice, then you're still required to sprinkle with something that accelerates melting.
Correct.
Is that what you want then?
He's saying like it's not effective in the following sentence.
Right, but, okay, I don't know.
But you may switch to sand for traction or a different ice melter that works at lower temperatures.
Right, but the sentence before that doesn't make an exception for things below 15.
There's no need for it to, because it makes it down there.
Okay,
I think you're
write it differently, I
overthinking
guess,
it.
but I would, yeah, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I would write it differently. I would write, this situation you do this situation you do that. That's how I would write it.
Well, I mean, I think we could just add, when ice is so formed on any sidewalk so that it cannot be removed, the person owning such premises shall sprinkle the sidewalk or curb ramp with materials to accelerate melting and prevent slipping above
When the temperature.
15 degrees Fahrenheit and
Right,
above.
that's what I'm saying, to add a phrase like that.
Well, no, you
No,
can't do
because
that
then
because then
if
it
it's
sounds
below
like if it's below
15, then you don't have to do anything.
Well, no, when it's below 15, it's
You know
not
what
a
I'm
rec-
saying?
No, so then when it's below 15, you don't recommend.
Yes, I do.
When it's below 15, you recommend that you don't recommend, you require them to use sand.
We're not requiring, we can't, we're not doing that. That's not what this is saying.
We're not,
It's a
we're merely
recommendation.
It's just a recommendation based on some additional knowledge that's put in here.
Okay, so what if does this allow somebody to only use sand at below 15? No?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
As long as you're getting rid of the ice
or dealing with
We won't-
traction
we
if
won't
it's
really
too
get-
cold.
or
to-
the
rid of
slipping
ice. You
issue.
won't really get rid of the ice.
Technically, you can use different ice melter anytime you want.
Right,
It's just
right.
that it costs more probably, and you'd prefer to
Right,
use ice
right.
if it's working, salt if it's working. I don't know, I think it makes sense the way it is
Okay,
and
are
that it's
most
good.
of the icers ionic compounds?
I mean, most are either sodium chloride, calcium chloride, magnesium chloride.
Technically speaking, those are all salts.
Yes,
Yeah, those are all salts.
correct.
Okay. Okay, I don't know. I would probably define the two situations and make requirements.
And nowhere here does it say the word salt, so it just
Well,
says,
salt will not be effective.
Yeah, so that part, so I think that language does need some cleaning up with a materials to
And
accelerate.
it's being a little picky-uni, but salt in a chemistry sense is an ionic compound.
Yeah. So we'll need
It's not
to,
just sodium chloride.
we'll make some
Well, I mean,
edits to, so in the part where it says salt will not be effective, it will just say, yeah, we can make the language match in that entire paragraph.
Good with that?
Okay?
Okay.
Maybe say rock salt or something.
Right. I guess I'm happy to move those first 3 bullet points in blue to another
To this.
location. Yeah, to kind of the back. I guess my question would be,
One other comment though was, if I may just real quick, the sources thing, I think the hyperlinks, they were looking for more of an actual cited, kind of like your, I don't know what that's called when an APA source.
Like a works cited.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so if you could, wherever that information is located, I mean, you can still keep those things on the bottom there, but like, for instance, this
Oh, like an
particular-
in-text citation.
Yes, like that's what this is saying here, a
So it
citation
could say
from
something
information.
like, according to blah, 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 1 ton of rock salt causes blah, blah, blah.
Or something like that.
okay,
Right.
got it.
So that the
Okay.
source is cited within the paragraph.
Okay, got it.
Like I said, these are still good informational things to have there.
Yeah.
Very much so.
But just wherever there's comments like this, it needs to be,
Where that's found.
because it's the city that's going to be putting it out there, right? So it needs to be like,
Right, okay.
And because it's being sent on a piece of paper, they can't click
Click
on a
it,
link.
sure, that part I understand.
just the one last thing I wanted to get out there before I forgot, so.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, so going back to this page, so that short paragraph in the black text there, it was existing language from the current city code. So that was existing. The blue, I think, is what was added, and then I edited it to match with city code, right? So like specified under section 2568. So we have no authority over anyone but the property owner. But I guess my question is, how does the city deal with someone like the owner of let's say the owner of like a multi-unit housing,
Sure,
right?
like an apartment complex?
Right, like an apartment complex.
Yeah, if
like,
there's a violation present, regardless of the violation, say it's long grass, the
owner.
The notice, I mean, we have the ability to send a notice to the occupants, but the enforcement ultimately comes down onto the owner.
Yeah.
So it's, it's just a notification for the occupant to make them aware. Like, if there's some agreement between the owner and the occupant,
Sure.
then maybe the occupant takes care of it, and then we're good to go.
Sure. So does removing the words or occupant get around that first comment?
I'm gonna pull up the actual document so we can click on these and see which language they're associated to, because these lines don't help much.
Yeah.
Just bear
I'm
with
happy
me.
to remove the thing where some kind of enforcement would be needed, so like staff receives 400 to 500 shoveling snow complaints. That sounds troubling.
Find sustainability.
I think the other point that this paragraph is meant to point out is that salt should not be left during non-ice events.
Don't
It
just,
should be cleaned up.
right, like don't just salt for fun.
Right. So I think the point here is to bring awareness to rock salt being applied either as a preventative measure, which is not useful, and to just kind of work that in. I don't know that the goal is necessarily enforcement, but the goal is to point to language and say, hey, there are good reasons why you should not do this.
Would that be better served as one of
Yeah.
the bullet points then with the flyer?
Sure.
Because when it comes to city code, right, a lot of that is rules, right, and so they have to be able to be enforced.
Mm-hmm.
So here's those. If we wanted to, so that first comment, we have no authority. That was related to the second part, occupant.
Proprietor or lessee neglects. Okay.
This one was for this. City of Oshkosh may sweep such material.
Okay,
I think he was saying
fine.
not
That
going
can
to be
get
possible.
removed.
And then the hazardous material one. So
Okay.
yeah, again, like that could go on the informational one
And
potentially.
it's a really good point to bring
Yeah.
up because people don't think of that.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like some now that staff has had time to look at this, maybe just some like big edits, and I can kind of rework this new back page, work in the citations, and then maybe work in these like sort of tips.
Yeah.
Does that seem doable?
Yeah, and I would also the mailer that you guys, I'm not familiar with that because I don't live in the city, but is it
Well, that's a shame.
just I used to? Is it just the back? It's just the back. It's not one full sheet. Is that?
As I recall, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet, but we do get
Sure.
the whole back of it.
I would just get creative with that, right? Maybe use Publisher or do something where you can maximize your space.
Right.
I know it was just a quick, probably.
Well, so I think the thing is, and I haven't seen what one of those. I don't have one saved. But I know typically the city will put sort of like some kind of information on one side, and then the kind of like snow and ice removal requirements are on the other. So I don't know. I guess what I'm asking is,
Where does that lie?
well, like, do we have real estate on a page that can be edited on both sides or be adjusted on both sides?
Oh,
Or is
yeah.
it just a one-sided thing?
If it's a piece of paper, both sides can have something on it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no questions about that.
Okay. Okay.
So I was just, when I was thinking about this being finalized, I would just, really maximize all of your area, get as much information on there as you possibly can think of that.
Yeah. Well, and I had this. I don't know why this looks like this here.
Well, as long as it's not intimidating and people will still actually read it.
Right.
Which bullet points help a lot with that.
Yeah. Right. So I'll go through and make some edits and then
Okay.
get that back to you for a kind of second review.
Um,
I'll incorporate what we've discussed and what staff put in here.
Okay.
Also, is this typically printed in black and white? Yes.
Yes.
So is your first image going to print well in black and white, the sidewalk?
Yeah, those are great questions.
I don't know. Yeah,
That,
probably
I mean,
not.
that's my only concern.
I can try putting these images into grayscale and just see
yeah,
what they're
maybe
going
just
to
play
look
around
like.
with it. Yeah.
Because I think that's a good point.
It's a helpful image too, though. Like that's
Yeah.
something you
Like
want
it is
people to
great.
see.
Yeah. I mean, can we blast that on our Facebook page too when the
Well,
time comes?
And so that was my other thought was, is there
Put it on color on
is
that.
there another way to get this information out? I mean, right, each of these bullet points could almost be its own little individual
Blurb.
informational snippet to people about.
Yeah, we can do a social media salt campaign. We'll call it that.
A good idea.
Yeah.
I think last winter I did share a couple times whatever Saltwise shared, right? But
Mhm.
it'd be nice if we did something on our own too.
Yeah, I could be more helpful.
Okay.
Good. So we're gonna kind of table it and maybe bring it back in the future at some point when
Yep.
Brad gets.
So
time to
I
take
will
care of it.
make edits for our next meeting.
And take your time on that. You have a whole month at least.
Right.
Because our next meeting will be a
August.
little different.
Right, this is true.
Okay. Sounds
No
good.
pressure. All right, moving on then from our snow and ice removal, let's go to weed cutting and lawn care.
Okay. So I'll bring that up too. And why not just bring up the real document, right?
We want the red line one.
Yeah, we can look at that one.
I had a question about that. Is the one that's not red line, Was
That's
it,
kind of like what that would look like, the final version.
that's what, if all these changes are made?
They were accepted, yeah.
Okay. That's the way I was reading it, but I wanted to be sure I was right.
Sure. Okay, for this one, and I don't have a copy, I do have a copy of it, okay, so before we begin, the attorneys looked at the final version and they had a number of comments. One of the biggest ones, and we don't really need to discuss it, but I think ultimately, after talking with them about this, it's probably going to be beneficial to the ordinance if we probably table this for this meeting and I meet with them and go through all of their edits and then bring it back to you. So that was maybe an oversight on my part. Ultimately, and they had some really good points, when we removed the language of all noxious weeds and rank growth or vegetation and switched it to all noxious weeds as defined by this and then classified as prohibited and restricted by the DNR, we removed the ability of city staff removing anything except what we listed here. So, you know what I mean?
Well, like
So
we
almost
cornered ourselves into their list.
yeah, and like that list has stuff like buckthorn on it and burning bush. And so if those become noxious weeds, like so chapter NR 40 is not a noxious weeds definition. We're saying that city of Oshkosh is going to define those as noxious weeds. So that the concern is that there's a lot of buckthorn in this area. If we define that as a noxious weed and people start complaining about buckthorn, that we're gonna have our hands tied big time.
It takes forever to get rid of. So
Yeah, and there'd be
problem.
a long, I mean, it's just not something that the city attorneys felt it was, a good thing to go down. So. that was-
Because their point would be they would have the authority to say that it's noxious and needs to be removed, and people may not be able to do that in a timely manner.
Just the pure quantity.
Volume.
And it's not just that. I mean, there's a number of other plants listed in that creeping Charlie, like, so if those were all declared a public nuisance, because this is public nuisance section, they would be subject to abatement, and that would be just, the pure quantity was troublesome.
Okay.
It would take a long, long time.
How do they suggest defining what is allowed and what isn't allowed then?
I think they recommended, again, and this was a very brief conversation that I had with them. The noxious weeds that are defined by Wisconsin section 66.0407. The other one, 66.96, I guess, isn't even a statute anymore.
Okay, I'm not seeing those numbers. Where-
You guys don't have that. I'm the only one that has.
On the
Oh,
staff
okay.
edits you're talking about?
Okay.
Or like that's
This
where
is
it's listed?
this piece of paper I have in front of me here is from the attorneys that I
Yeah.
just had a meeting with.
Okay, it's actually noxious weeds, Wisconsin section 66, yeah, it is in.
Yeah.
Part
There you are.
B. Okay, so they don't want to use the list from the DNR. So how,
Potentially, like I said,
Yeah.
I want to have a
You want-
larger
okay.
conversation with them and
Okay.
see what their
I-
recommendations are, and then
I-
maybe bring it back, because there was a
Yeah.
number of things. But ultimately, like, part of what their argument was if we remove the ability of staff to remove other rank growth and vegetation, and we don't define what we can and can't remove, there's no need for a native plant ordinance. Because we're already removing the ability to cut anything in the beginning.
Well, wasn't that kind of the point
where are
we came to at the end?
removing the ability to cut anything? What are you talking about?
So the original code gave staff the ability to do more. All noxious weeds and other rank growth or vegetation.
Right, so the question is, how are they defining vegetation that they can?
Well, right, it
remove?
was an open door.
It was an open door. Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that was the concern of the student report and the concern Michelle and I had.
Sure.
Are there any protected plants that don't have to, the city can't order you to remove?
Right.
I
So,
brought up this, I talked to somebody about this, and I said, what, the vegetative growth could be a rose bush, and they said, well, it could be a tree. You know, so how do
Yeah.
you protect people's?
Right. So again, and point taken,
Yeah.
well taken. But when we removed the other section, and other rank growth and vegetation, and just limit it to just noxious weeds, then we go down to subset B, where we say all uncut turf grass, noxious weeds, or other vegetative growth as defined in 1733E. That's just noxious weeds. We're kind of repeating ourselves.
Yeah, and it's actually not consistent language. Those two parts are different. Because we don't define vegetative growth in Part E. We define noxious
It's just saying,
weeds.
but you're reading too far into it again. Simply put, noxious weeds is already defined. We could get rid of that whole entire second part of that, or
Right.
anyways, either way.
Right.
Nothing else is listed there,
Right.
so staff would only be able to get rid of noxious weeds, which doesn't include, that list doesn't include, I can't think, I'm not a horticulturist, but like, I think Creeping Charlie was one of them that's not on that list. There's other weeds that aren't on that noxious weed list, that aren't defined, that we wouldn't then also be able to abate, which probably isn't what this board wants either.
Okay. Okay.
You know what I
I
mean?
guess the question is, how do you say these plants are okay and these plants aren't
Are not,
okay?
right.
How are you going to do that? So, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess the rely on the DNR list was because it was a list already made up.
Yep.
But how do you?
And then, so the problem is, and then with, like I said, with those, with that list, it lists more than noxious weeds. And it has a lot of things in there that would be really difficult for the city to go through and
So
manage.
there's some things that are noxious weeds that they feel would be too hard to remove, right? Basically, but then there's also other things that aren't noxious weeds that they do want to remove.
Right.
So how do they decide what they want to remove and what they don't want to require removal of?
Yeah, exactly. So, we talked about the Appleton ordinance that you provided, Lisa, and, they do a decent job with theirs. And so, again, the attorneys wanted to kind of look at this a little bit further, figure out what the right way, if we're going down the road of rewriting this ordinance, they would like to make sure that it's done appropriately and that the city has teeth to stand on.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. What does Appleton do? How do they distinguish what you're allowed to have and what you're not allowed to have?
So they have a whole section, it's called Article 3, Weeds and Wild Growth, and then they have a number of items in that section or in that article.
Do they list specific plants or
They-
descriptions of what the plants are like, or?
Yeah, kind of. So they have a definition for it, and it lists extra stuff. Like it says, shall also grant the ability for ragweed, giant ragweed, burdock. So they list a couple other items. And then it also talks about a weed commissioner shall destroy or cause to be destroyed noxious weeds, and is further empowered to enter upon public and private lands and to cut or remove the accumulation of growth of weeds, grass, brush, and other rank or offensive vegetation, which has grown to a greater than the following heights. So, it gives and empowers the
Right,
staff
right.
to
I'm just
do what they
wondering
need to do to
how-
cut down.
How are they, now they use the term noxious weeds.
Yep.
How are they defining noxious weeds?
They have it, same thing,
With the-
WSA 66.0407.
Okay, so they're saying they have the right to force a homeowner to get rid of buckwheat. Because buckwheat's in that list.
Buckthorn is on
Buckthorn's
the
in the
DNR list,
Not the Wisconsin
not on
segment,
the
66.
Wisconsin list.
Okay,
Two
so,
different things.
okay. Okay, so did we have okay, I'm missing something here. then.
Yep, Wisconsin Department of Natural
Oh,
Resources.
as
per
prohibited
chapter.
or restricted by the Wisconsin. Oh, okay, so the problem isn't with the sections that, it's the and/or classified as prohibited by the DNR. That's the problem, right?
Well, two things. So we had listed Wisconsin section 66.0407 and 66.96. The attorney said that 66.96 is no longer a statute. So that was
Okay.
just
Okay.
need to be removed regardless.
Do they have any problem with the 66.0407?
No,
Okay, and that doesn't include the buckthorn or,
Correct.
okay,
It says 660407 noxious weeds. B, noxious weed means Canada thistle, leafy spurge, field bindweed, and any weed designated as a noxious weed by the Department of Natural Resources by rule.
oh, and then we're back to, and so then by rule, does the Department of Natural Resources include buckthorn and creeping Charlie, or?
Just says it lists those three, and then any weed designated as noxious by the DNR by rule, whatever that means.
It means they probably they have a set of rules.
Because they didn't want to limit themselves if something new comes creeping in. No pun
Right,
intended.
right. But the city attorneys aren't comfortable with using.
Well, it was kind of, there's a
Well, it's-
couple of different things happening.
Well,
that
in
they
this
were.
specific part of the DNR, like chapter NR 40, we're not
Right.
necessarily talking about DNR rules, we're talking about this specific chapter.
The NR 40.
That they're
Okay.
not comfortable with.
Okay, they're not comfortable with that.
Because you said it's not even a noxious weed.
Yeah, so
Chapter?
so the prohibited, the ones in NR 40 that are listed as prohibited and restricted are not necessarily considered noxious.
Right, so there's two different parts of the DNR that we're talking about. There's the noxious rules, and then there's this chapter. So this chapter specifically, they're not comfy
Okay,
with.
so,
Right.
so there's the issue with,
That specific.
the biggest issue is with including the chapter NR 40 then.
Yeah, because we're defining, the city is now defining noxious weeds as that chapter.
Okay, so
So that would mean that we would have to go down the road of eliminating all of the buckthorn in the city. You know, or people could complain that their
Okay,
neighbor has
okay, so they,
buckthorn.
but
you know?
they're okay with including this 66.0407.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I guess
Like I said, there's a number of things that they made comments on, and I didn't get a chance to like have a in-depth conversation before
Okay.
this meeting about it,
And
so.
then you're saying the beginning of Part B is, the beginning of Part B is not needed if you have what you have under 33E, then.
The
It's
way-
not completely redundant, it's actually worded a little differently. So you have the all uncut turf grass, noxious weeds, or other vegetative growth as defined in 1733. So assuming you change the definition in 1733E, that's only addressing noxious weeds, it's not addressing what vegetative growth is.
Just a very brief comment, you could just simply get rid of or other vegetative growth as defined in
that
17E,
would
because
be-
it already is,
Yeah,
because we
that
already
would be
list
my-
noxious weeds.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is what
what
that is.
I would recommend.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I.
So again, those were just like very brief comments that she made when I was talking to them.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would recommend, that we not use a term like vegetative growth.
And then the other thing with B was just like, or A and B really, was like that because we got rid of the all-encompassing ability to remove rank growth or vegetation, that we didn't define anything else within A or B besides uncut turf grass, dandelions, and noxious weeds.
Right,
We're
right.
limiting ourselves from things like creeping Charlie and other types of weeds that aren't listed as noxious. So
Right.
there was some concern with that, right? That we need to have more power to remove things that are issues, weeds that are problems.
Yeah, I guess it's nice to let homeowners and property owners know what is the thing that they can't do. you
Yeah.
know, And what the thing is that they can do,
Mm-hmm.
so then, whether they want a list of, specific plants, or whether they want to empower somebody to publish a list of specific plants,
Yeah.
I don't know,
I'm not sure either. So, like I said, I'm gonna have a larger meeting with them. I already have it scheduled. And we're gonna go over it and try to see what we can come up with, and then I wanna bring it back again when we, sometime this summer.
I have a couple of points I'd like clarified, if we could.
Mhm.
One is, right at the end of our discussion last time with this,
Yep.
Ken had raised the question about, what were we doing here? Was this for entire lawns that were going to go to prairie, whatever? Or was it just for landscaping purposes? Which is this addressing?
So I added this section, this is brand new for you guys, the very last section under private, so D, and then I added a 1, applicability.
Okay.
That, it's an attempt to try to clarify that.
Right, and that's probably an improvement over what was
Yeah.
there before. And I'm assuming it's not landscaping located directly around the home or in any other typical landscaping design. So that's like around parking lots or along driveways, those would be typical landscaping areas, right?
Yeah, again, so like we tried to use a word, it's kind of loose, right? Like traditional, typical, what does that mean? Like, I don't know if we really need to go that far into it. We're trying to leave it somewhat reasonable and sensible.
Being changed
Okay,
from-
so that I can understand this, Brandon, are you saying that the whole section D, which is the second page basically, is addressing the concern that Ken had as far as it being for a full lawn, a full prairie, instead of turf grass, and that we're going to try to put both scenarios into one, that we're just going to do it
Yeah.
with one code change?
So like, and that was part of what I brought up with the attorneys, is that idea got brought up, and that's how we moved into talking about Appleton's ordinance. So they weren't opposed to doing it that way. So
Okay.
I'm
So this will take care of everything that we were trying to do if we give it another month or two for you and the attorneys to
Yeah, I
discuss
think
it.
so. Some of what they were questioning, I'll have to probably get the Parks Department back involved too, because it's the level of how much do they want to be involved with enforcement.
I noticed that, I assume it's the Parks Director that was listed in here that would be
Well, it says or designee, so in the past it was the city forester.
city forester, and we
And
still
that-
have one,
Yep,
yes.
and that's still the plan to go forward, I think, is with that position.
Okay.
I was curious too about the applying for approval. It's normally not written into code what the criteria for approval are? Is it dependent on since this is the Director of Parks, do they have to publish what criteria are so people know when they apply? Or is it completely his or her personal judgment under Part 2D2? So they shall apply, so when somebody decides, well, I do want to do this I do want to have prairie instead of turf grass, so I'll make up my plan for what I'm going to do, that's normally not in the code, but would it be expected that the Parks Director would publish what is acceptable, some guidelines to people trying to do this? Or is it just give it a shot, apply, and I'll let you know if I like it or not, or?
I mean, as of now, there is no guidelines for it, but I suppose that could be something that could be created.
Right, or is that something that should be in the code, that the Parks Director should publish guidelines, or?
I think it would help, right? And we could add an image to this section of the code. We have it in the zoning code. I don't know why there couldn't be an image here which showed your typical landscaped area and then your native plant area. It would give it just an idea of what we're talking about and what
Well, and in
what
the
a plan
zoning
could look
code, we
like.
list a lot of the different plants too, and say if they're
Right.
good, bad, or indifferent.
Yep.
Right, usually, okay, again, this is being picky, but I looked up what a prairie is, and they're usually talking about a grassland
Yep.
with maybe other plants mixed in with it, but it's not, a prairie would not be, would not be if you had flowering native. wildflowers.
My prairie's gonna be all about wildflowers. When I
Okay, well,
get,
prairie, when I looked it up, it said it's a grassland, is what it said.
I mean, yeah, if you have a different word, we
Yeah.
can, if you have a recommendation for a different word, there, that was just, trying to define
Yeah,
the
well,
area.
yeah, but,
And so like, again, going back to Appleton, they have it clearly defined what's allowed. It says, you have to be set back this far off a property line. If you're next to a garage, it's gotta be this far off. Can't be a fire hazard, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things in there, so ours would be less restrictive, in my opinion, by allowing it for the entire yard, but maybe it's neater, nicer, I don't know.
I think
To do
their
it that way,
land-
more
their-
clear.
Their
I don't
land
know.
lots are a little different too. Like the houses are a lot closer together in Appleton. So some people would complain that like your weeds or grass was going over onto someone else's yard. Whereas in Oshkosh, I don't think we would have that type of problem. as
Maybe in some
much.
spots, but
Some areas.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking at D2. Is the intent that someone who wishes to convert their yard from turf grass to native plants, they have to apply to do that?
yeah, that's how it currently is now too.
Okay.
But if you want to turn your yard into a native area, that you have to get approval to do so.
that's a little, like with no mow it was a registration process, which is a little different.
Right, and that I understand, but like,
Yeah.
so what does that look like?
What does, what
Like,
part of
like
it?
how do you apply?
You just would draw up a plan that shows basically your land,
Uh-huh.
and you know, this
Label it.
20 by 40 section is going to be my managed landscape area. And then you would dictate what you're going to plant there.
You submit that to the Parks Department.
Yep.
You know, from a sustainability point of view, does it seem like people should have to be applying to have turf grass?
Yes,
Well,
please.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm,
When that got brought up the
Upside
last
down
time too,
here.
right? Was we were trying to.
Isn't this like what Ken brought up towards
Yeah,
the
the
end,
point
right?
got brought up
Feels backwards.
that like we didn't have a definition of what a managed landscape area was. So why did someone not need to apply to plant non-native species
right.
in wherever?
Well, and the other point I was going to make, and that's fine. I just was trying to wrap my head around that. I like what you added for D1. I think that probably solves a lot of the issues that I think we're trying to get at here. The other thing I would say, and I was thinking about this in relation to the salt ordinance and edits, is that I think a lot of what we're trying to do here is bring awareness into code. I think that gets very gray and fuzzy because I don't know that enforcement always happens or wants to happen when we bring awareness to issues. And so I think some of what we're talking about is, and perhaps maybe what Margie just said, like laying out for people more specifically. And I'm not suggesting that has to happen here, but I think creating a list of sort of like, these are the okay plants, these are the, you know, sort of prohibited plants, either based on lots of good information and or based on the DNR's, you know, recommendations. And then these are right sort of, so maybe like, I think some of that work can also happen in other spaces.
Yeah, I mean, right, we're looking at public nuisance code, right? So there's definitely room, I mean, like we've talked about multiple times, in the zoning code, it's very neatly listed, all of the recommended native plants
Yeah.
for
You get-
developments.
You get points for certain plants. I don't, right?
Yeah, that's mostly just for like commercial developments.
Right, but you're allowed to use plants other than what are on the list.
Correct.
From the zoning code.
You just get more points if you use native
More points
plants.
if you use certain plants.
Yep. So it's advantageous for a developer to plant native plants in their land, to show it in their landscape
If they're on
plan.
the list.
Would we
right?
be
Yeah.
able to just add a line in here that would reference back to the zoning, the pages of the zoning code that
Yeah.
that list those?
If that's
Yeah, so
already
we don't-
defined.
But the
like-
list is not all comprehensive of all native plants.
No, but it's an example.
Yeah, it'd be an
It
example.
would say,
but
for
people would be
example,
able to-
see zoning, blah, blah, blah.
But people would be able to use native plants beyond what's listed. in
Sure,
that.
of course.
Correct. But this would be a good launching pad, and if we don't have to
Right.
reinvent the wheel, that would be great.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll definitely make a note of that.
I think keeping it simple but also informative, but at the end of the day, this is a code that has to be enforceable. So,
Right.
like you're saying, there is a line of how much detail do we add to
Yeah.
the code.
Right, like
And
how much
not-
education versus like rules.
And not putting ourselves, like pigeonholing ourselves into a point of, you know, right, like basically working ourselves into a hole of the code where we were, seems
Yeah,
like we're at now.
Which, yeah, we kind of did, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't think any of us noticed that kind of way of looking at it, but when the attorneys read this, they were like, well, if you removed this first section, you don't even need an exemption because you've already exempted everything.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, I definitely hadn't thought of it that
So,
way.
you know what I mean? And it makes a lot of sense, so.
Yeah.
All right, so I think, like I said, I'm sorry that this one's taking a little bit longer than maybe it needs to, but things come up last minute and then
Oh, it's great,
things
Brandon.
change.
Not
Yeah,
a problem.
really good
I'm
discussion,
just
though.
glad that they took a look at it and
Yeah.
that we're moving with it. It's
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
standing still, so I'm happy with that.
I'll just make an asterisk here that we want to add, some zoning landscape section to this ordinance as well.
Yes.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, we will be skipping the Menominee Park Shoreland Restoration update tonight. Agenda items for future meeting. We have our DNR grant recommendation, which, who's working on that? What is that?
What was that, what was the one again?
DNR
DNR
grant.
grant recommendation.
Pat had,
Well,
That
there
was
was something
Pat?
recommended by one of the students.
Students.
I didn't
Did it-
find exactly what it was.
I think it was
Yeah.
a tree thing.
Urban forestry.
Or-
Yeah.
Oh.
It was an
right,
urban
it was
forestry
their
grant.
Is that what the grant was for, was
Yeah.
urban forestry?
Yeah, it
So it
was in
was.
one of the student reports.
yeah, when I
Okay.
rewatched the video from the last meeting, Pat, you had brought up that you wanted to make sure that we recommended that parks or
Right.
whomever applies for
Right.
that, so.
Right.
Oh, yeah, the urban forest grant from the DNR up to $25,000 due October 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to get that on somebody's radar.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like that's something relatively easy that we
And off
can
our
recommend, and then I would just write up
I
a
mean, when I
memo
saw
or
the minutes,
something.
I'm like, what was the DNR grant?
I know, I was,
But,
So
but-
are we wanting to maybe send a recommendation then?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes,
guess so.
So,
definitely.
and we'll try to shoot for that soon?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
is that something the forester can help with, right?
I'm sure they have nothing else to do, especially when they're brand new, but
But I mean, it's.
But it
something
would
they
fall
are-
in that
it'd be
venue.
Under, yeah.
yeah, in their purview.
You got 4 hours a week on this stuff, right?
Oh, I won't be writing that one.
Right.
To be clear.
Yeah.
Hard pass.
Okay, so that's one
Presumably the
thing.
forester would be most knowledgeable.
We're working on the marketing flyer for the energy-saving home improvements.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh, that's
okay, got it.
Bad.
So, is this another item where if we draft something, I mean, I'm assuming staff will need to look at it before it would go out, but is it something that could be included in sort of a regular, like it could go out with everyone's water bill or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from the little bit of discussions that I've had about putting things in the water bill or putting things in some, I
Mailer.
don't, what, some type of mailer, like the city maybe sends out with the garbage, you know, they let you know,
Oh, sure, like that.
What the
Nancy
calendar is
thing.
for
Yeah.
calendar.
Yeah.
adding a piece of paper to that, as long as I think we can do like 4, 6, or 8 pages total before the cost goes up.
Yeah, I think this would be
Yeah.
like one front and back.
Yeah, right, so that's not an issue.
I think the thing that will be, I think the kind of lever that helps this come to fruition is a website where that information is all. And I know we had worked on that previously.
Yep.
Right, but maybe revisiting that and then pairing it with this kind of trimmed down version in a mailer
Right.
And then add the social media aspect too.
and add the social media aspect.
Just let me know when and what info.
And we will need a bit of lead time for it to hit, we have the sustainability page.
Yep.
It just doesn't get updated very often.
Yeah, I mean, the IT staff is great on updating that page. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but already I sent it one day, and the very next day, all of the new reports are on there.
Nice.
Oh,
I mean,
If
they're
you
really,
scroll up a
they're
little
quick.
bit, I think I keep going all the way up to the top. I think there is a section. I want to say it's at the top. Yeah, energy. Like we could just stick that little tidbit right
Yeah,
there.
right.
Can-
Same with waste and recycling.
On that page, can you refer to other resources in the state, like Focus on Energy?
I think if you click on some of those.
Some
Yeah, I
of them
mean, some
have
of these
them
will
Or
in
is
take you
that
there.
already there?
Like there's
Yeah.
Yeah.
public service. And this is
Yeah,
where
focus on energy.
social media, like I used to do a theme every month. It was
Yeah.
a lot. And so in every month there was like a theme and like this is where those themes came from, was
Right.
from our page. So we've done this historically, but then there were changes to our social media rules and then
When you click on
I stopped.
learn about renewable, what does it say? What does it do right now?
The MREA site.
Well, the other one would be Renew Wisconsin.
Oh, I just wonder if it would make more sense to pull up something like this, right? Like literally just pull up a
4 years ago?
yeah, that was created, right?
Yeah, we did that one.
like a link to a PDF that would
Yep.
basically just have like, did you know that, right? You can apply for this money and
Well,
add
yeah.
solar to your home and
Yep, something like this I think would be useful. This is a trifold document that could go to the farmer's market or something.
That's where it was used, if I remember correctly, right? Wasn't this one of our farmers market flyers?
Yes, it was.
okay.
So,
Okay.
So, yes, working on that.
Okay, it's on the
Which,
future items for,
cool.
So if something's drafted, when do staff need it before discussion of the next meeting?
so again, so this is a Monday meeting, so that means that I need to have, so if staff needs to view it prior to the meeting, that means I need to have it before the Monday before the meeting.
So
You
say
need it
the-
really like 2 weeks prior.
Yeah, that would be, because then I have to try to set up a meeting and everybody's schedules are
Calendars.
full and,
And our next meeting is Monday, July 18th.
well, we're
A
gonna talk
little-
about it
We're getting to that.
Oh, okay. Got it.
tentatively.
Got it. Okay.
Is there anything else on the items for future agenda or?
There is.
Okay.
Coming up at some point, we want to review those spring 22 student reports, and obviously, we've already kind of worked some of those in. But they always give us such good information, and we just don't want to let it slip away. And then somewhat related to those reports, or at least one of them, is a sustainability budget request. Sustainability Board has never had any kind of operating budget whatsoever. The Rain Barrel workshops that we ran that required some funding came to us from a gift from somebody and kept getting recycled until it was gone, which got us through quite a few. But as far as having city money to work with, we've really never had that. In order to do that, we have to let the council know ahead of time that we're going to want a budget, and then they have to pass it as part of the total budget, which happens in like October before.
Well, I feel like the conversations are already happening.
Well, they're already
Remember
working
Aaron-
on stuff. I mean, the
Yeah.
budget itself, I
Oh,
think,
right.
gets passed about then, so,
So I think I had brought that up
yeah.
during the last, I don't know, November when that grant cycle was happening because I keep hitting roadblocks with that. So I was encouraging SAB, I think at that point, to keep in mind to maybe think about creating a sustainability advisory board budget, which is just an ask.
Right, all we can do is
Other
ask.
Advisory boards have budgets or, or money allocated? Do other advisory boards have money allocated?
I don't know,
No idea.
not sure.
I believe that some do. I couldn't tell you exactly which ones, but I do know there are some that do.
And then in that same realm, I guess I'll just give a quick update on, I'm still working with Abby from Elevate it's the nonprofit out of Chicago that I told you guys about that is going to help hopefully with the next grant cycle, assuming there's another grant cycle. Did I not tell you guys about
I'm
this?
totally in the dark here.
Me too.
I don't know what's happening.
I think you dreamed you talked to us about that.
Maybe. So,
He dreams about us.
maybe. What's that grant called? The big one that happens every year? That you told us about, like you guys got money for it at the university?
Oh, the Energy Innovation Grant Program?
Yeah,
Through
that one.
Wisconsin, or through the Public Service Commission?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm in contact with a nonprofit that potentially this is what they do, but they'll be able to come in, do like an energy analysis of the city buildings, figure out where our needs are, and then help us in the grant writing process. And then basically, they're our matching fund, kind of.
Got it.
Oh, they will match funds.
Well, no,
They are the match.
in their time.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, okay.
with the work
okay,
that they
since
do.
the grants require matches.
Yeah.
or-
Right.
Right. Sometimes they require match.
And then, if and when we receive grant funding, we would pay them back in some fashion.
Okay, that sounds like a good,
Yeah, so I
And
mean, it's
who-
moving. I
Who is
mean,
that you're working with?
Her name's Abby or Abigail. I can't think of her last name.
that's from
They're called
Elevate.
Elevate.
Elevate. I think that's what the name
So
of
they're
it.
basically like an ASCO energy
Company.
service company.
Elevate Energy.
Elevate Energy, so their focus is energy issues.
Yeah. And she's written tons of those grants, or they have. Maybe not
And the
specifically her.
focus would be on city buildings, for the most part.
Yeah, so remember in those conversations last year, it was kind of like, I'm trying to think of what the options were, but one of them was creating an energy analysis So we were trying to, the city would get that, and then we
Right.
would use that comprehensive energy analysis to then,
That would be
Further.
wonderful. I'm assuming we haven't done anything.
no,
like
so
that.
then if we had that plan, then that would make future grant writing easier, because we would say
Right.
we have it in this plan kind of thing.
Right, and it also.
That's the thought.
So is Elevate doing the audit, or Elevate is kind of doing the pre-work, and what you would be applying for is the money to do the audit?
They would be kind of doing, it's both. It's kind of like pre-work / audit. Like they would come in and they wanted numbers for each of the buildings to see what our energy usages are, and then that would kind of help them determine which ones they need to come in and see
Right.
where efficiencies could be made.
Okay.
That's like an energy audit then, right? Those are usually pretty expensive, I think. aren't they?
When we were allowed to weigh in on the county, not the county, that would be silly, on the city facilities building, the city shop, basically, that's on the corner of Witzel and
Right.
that other street. Yeah, yeah.
We know what you're talking about.
Idaho.
The big
We're
new
there.
building,
The
yes.
newer building.
We had
Rugby.
taken that to the council and asked that it be designated as a LEED building, and we got turned down on that request because of the cost of the LEED certification. And I was disappointed about that at the time, because one of the reasons we wanted the LEED certification was so that they would be tracking the savings based on, what had been done for that building and all of that. Well, as another building came up and the same architect was involved, I've been told that the architects themselves, the construction group that we worked with, did do that audit, and they do have that information. So we do have some things with
Yeah.
some municipal buildings that we can go back to. It's just not ours, we just have to ask somebody else for it.
Sure.
But to me, that was a huge relief, because, and I mean, to be fair, the council at the time, that was a very different council for one thing, but it was $50,000, and they felt that the cost for LEED certification was, and they felt that amount of money could go better into the building itself or into some other municipal use. However,
if-
knowing that if you don't have that information, that you can say, here's the sustainable part, how do we ever prove that we're saving money? And the thing is, sustainability is incredibly financially wise. It's just convincing people to do it,
We have to know
because they see a price tag and don't understand what the back end of that is.
And-
the upfront price tag, and they don't know what the savings will be each year.
If SAB for the last 10 years had been getting money in the budget every year, you would have been able to afford that out of that budget.
We could have bought my Tesla.
What?
But you know what I mean, right? So that there was an opportunity there potentially, but there was no money, and if
Right,
some
and
money was set aside for
we didn't pursue
sustainable
it at that
things,
point,
then
so.
Yeah.
that's kind of the logic on that.
Yep, so maybe by 2030 or something. Okay, well then, our next meeting,
Well, anything else for future agendas? on
oh, does
anybody's-
anybody else have anything else for,
I think that's plenty.
I think that'll do for one little meeting? Well, the one little meeting, because we can't do it on July 4th, because people at the city have decided to take the day off, along with everybody else in the world. The next available date for us would be Monday, July 18th, and we did talk about this before. Is that still okay with everybody to meet that night?
I believe so.
That would be the third Monday instead of the first Monday.
And then we would still meet the first Monday in August. So
We
we have
would
two
ag-
kind of close.
Yes, we'd have a 6-week break now, and then we'd have another meeting in 2 weeks. So within a 2-month period, it comes out just right.
I just think that there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now in SAB, so it would be, I think, a disadvantage to miss a month.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to ask if our 6 o'clock start time continues to work for everyone, or if there would be other recommendations for that. For example, would y'all like to start meeting at 2 in the afternoon, or 4 o'clock, or?
Yes.
Get off of work. Yeah, that'd be cool.
I don't mind 2 in the afternoon, but if people who work might mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah.
Can't just
Okay,
close
I
the
So-
think during the summer, if possible, like I would prefer 5, but if people work, like 6 is okay too.
I like 6 better than 7.
Oh, yes, so does
That's-
Brandon.
You guys like 6 too? Is that good for you?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
5.
5:30 could work.
Right, like 5:30 could be okay. I would have to adjust some things, but
Yeah.
they're things that can be easily moved.
Would that be all year round or just?
That would just be through the summer.
Okay.
So
Is
There,
it worth
there
a
is a
change for
difficulty
few-
with us changing too frequently just because of the fact that we're televised,
Sure.
so.
I say just keep it at 6 then. It seems that everyone can make it at that time.
They either show up or they don't, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll stay with 6 o'clock for Monday, July 18th. And unless anybody else has anything important? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor?
You said-
Aye.
Great, thank you, guys.